With Christmas fast approaching, I've been busy spending the last few weeks stitching up my new Christmas tree ornaments collection. So today I wanted to share with you how to stitch up this cute candy cane tree decoration. With the help of some festive twine, this design looks so cute hung up on the Christmas tree. It's also easy to stitch and completely beginner friendly. Let's take a look at what you'll need to make this. First of all, you'll need a 3-inch embroidery hoop. This is the perfect size for hanging on the tree. Next up, you will need 2 pieces of fabric. As you'll know from my previous videos, I always stitch on 2 pieces of fabric. Helps hold the fabric nice and tight in the hoop, and it also hides any trailing stitches. Next up, embroidery threads. I've got 2 DMC skeins here. I've got a white and I've got a red, both really lovely and festive and really nice to stitch with. Next up, I've got some lovely red ribbon. This is going to look really festive, tied on the fastening. And then I've got some nice red and white festive twine. This is what I'm going to use to hang the hoop from the tree. And then 2 embroidery essentials. I've got my thread snippers or scissors and a lovely sharp needle. I'm also going to show you how to back the hoop, so grab yourself some festive pattern fabric and your scissors or pinking shears. So the first thing we're going to do is prep the hoop ready for stitching. So I'm just going to undo the fastening of the hoop, and we're going to lay the inner circle down on the table, and I'm just going to pop the 2 pieces of fabric on over the top and then layer on the outer hoop. And I'm just going to push that round the edges to make sure it's on there nice and securely. So my hoop is prepped and I've transferred my design using a heat erase ball pen. These are great to use as if you've got any visible lines once you finish stitching, you can simply erase them with heat. My favourite to use is a Pilot Friction pen. I've linked this to my Amazon storefront. So now we're ready to start stitching. So I'm starting with 6 strands of the red embroidery thread. And I'm going to start by stitching the middle candy cane just in back stitch. So I'm just going to push my needle through just at the bottom of the drawing. Oh, there we go, just get that in place nicely. And I'm going to pull the thread all the way through. And now I'm just going to insert my needle about a stitch length away, pulling that thread all the way through to create our first back stitch. And now I'm just going to continue stitching the whole of this candy cane in back stitch. I'm going to try and keep the stitches nice and even as this is creating the base for our whipped back stitch. So keeping the back stitches nice and even will keep our whipped back stitch looking really nice and tidy. If back stitch or whipped back stitch are new to you, or if you fancy a little refresher before you start stitching, you can find full stitch tutorials for both of these over on my channel. So as I mentioned earlier, this design is completely beginner friendly. We're actually only going to use 2 types of stitches, so whip back stitch for creating the candy canes and then running stitch to back the hoop at the end. So it's super simple to stitch, but it just looks really effective and very Christmassy. So as I'm nearing the top, I'm just going to curve my stitches slightly and I'm just going to keep them even in length as I work my way around. So this design is available as part of my Christmas tree ornament pattern bundle, which I designed this year. It contains 8 designs altogether. They are all beginner friendly and all based on a 3-inch hoop, so they are all perfect for hanging on the Christmas tree. I've got some really fun festive designs in there, so a Christmas tree, a little bobble hat, a Christmas pudding and a Christmas wreath amongst some others. So if you're looking to make your own Christmas tree decorations, check them out. I will pop the link in the description. They are available in my Etsy shop. So just a couple more stitches to go, then we finished our first candy cane. It's looking lovely and festive in that red thread. There we go, so just got one more stitch. So just pushing that needle through, and then we're going to pull the thread all the way through. There we go. And that is our first candy cane finished. I'm just going to secure that on the back with a knot. So now we're ready to turn this into whipped back stitch, just like this candy cane here. So for this, I'm going to grab my white thread. Again, I've got 6 strands here. So start by pushing your needle through the fabric just at the base of the back stitches. And then we're going to pull the thread through and now slide the needle underneath that first stitch and pull the thread through. And then that is the start of our whipped back stitch. Now I'm just going to do this again for a second time, so pulling that thread all the way through. And now you can see that rope-like effect is starting to appear. So now I'm just going to keep repeating this until we have finished the whole candy cane. whipped back stitch in these colours is my all-time favourite for Christmas. I absolutely love it, and in the run-up to Christmas I will try to squeeze it into as many projects as I possibly can. So now we've reached the top of the candy cane. I find it really helpful just to spin the hoop a little bit as you stitch. It just helps to avoid getting your needle tangled with the other stitches. So we're nearly there, just a couple more stitches to go. Just sliding that needle under. I'm loving the effect that this is creating. So onto our last stitch, just pulling that thread all the way through. Now to secure this in place, all I'm going to do is push the needle through at the base of the stitches. I'm just going to pull that thread all the way through and then secure it on the back with a knot. There we go, we've got our first finished candy cane. I'm going to use the exact same method for the other two candy canes, so let's get stitching. So here are our finished candy canes. Now before we add the other details like the bows, I'm actually going to back the hoop. I'm going to show you my favourite way to do this. So to start, I'm just going to grab my pinking shears and I'm just going to trim around the edges, just leaving a little bit of excess fabric. So that's the first little bit done, and I'm just going to work my way around the edge of the hoop. You can use regular fabric scissors for this, or you can use pinking shears like I'm using. I like using these because they stop the fabric from fraying quite so much once you've cut it. So I'm happy with how I've trimmed the fabric, so now I'm just going to remove it from the hoop just by loosening the fastening. Now to back the hoop, I'm just going to pop the inner hoop on the table, and I've got my pattern fabric which I'm just going to put face down on top of that hoop, making sure it's nice and central. Now I'm going to layer our stitch design over the top. Again, just making sure we've got that as central as possible. Now I'm going to layer the outer hoop just on top. And I'm just going to give it a little squeeze just to secure it. So now I'm just going to give it a little tidy up just by pulling at the edges of the fabric so that it's keeping it nice and tight, but also ensuring that our design is staying nice and straight in the hoop as well. As I work my way around different sections, I'm just going to keep tightening my fastening as well, just to make sure we've got the fabric in there as securely as possible. So now we need to remove the excess fabric. So I'm just going to grab my pinking shears and I'm just going to trim around the edge of the hoop fabric. So I'm just going to do a check around the edges and just trim off any little excess bits of fabric we've got there, just to make sure it's as tidy as possible and to make sure it's nice and even around the edges as well. So that's now looking nice and even on the front, and if you turn it over you can see your nice patterned fabric as well. So the final step for backing the hoop is to gather the edges. So what we're going to do is grab some embroidery thread. I have got 6 strands of thread in this lovely red colour, and we're going to work running stitch around the edge of the fabric. So start by pushing your needle up through the fabric. There we go, and then pull your thread all the way through, and then just start working your running stitch around the edge. So then pull that thread all the way through, again just there. There we go. And I'm just going to do this edge first. So again, just pushing that needle through, pulling the thread all the way through, and then creating another running stitch. So now I'm just going to pull this last running stitch through, and then just in this gap here, I'm going to push my needle back through, just pulling the end of the thread through. So to gather the fabric, I'm just going to gently pull this thread so that it's gathering those edges in. Just give another little extra tug if it needs it. And that's our edges tucked in nicely. Now we've got some excess thread, so I'm just going to trim it down, and then I'm just going to separate the threads in half, and then I'm just going to tie them in a knot to secure them in place. And to make it doubly secure, I'm just going to tie another knot. And then just trim off any excess thread. So now the hoop is backed, we're going to add on these little bows. So to create these, grab yourself 6 strands of embroidery thread that has been threaded through the eye of the needle, and then slide your needle underneath that first candy cane, and then you can slide the needle off. Now holding your hoop nice and straight, start to form the bow by first of all tying a knot. Now, I'm not the tidiest person in the world when it comes to tying tiny bows, but I do find that it helps to tie it quite big to begin with and to position it in place, because then you can adjust it. So like this, for instance, is far too big for this design, but I'm just going to spread it out and I'm just going to pull the thread through, just shrinking that bow down. I'm just going to give it a little tighten as I go, and then just make sure I'm happy with the size. There we go, that is looking just right. And then I'm just going to grab my thread snippers and just trim off the excess thread. So there's bow number 1, it's looking very cute. And then I'm just going to add bows to the other 2 candy canes. Here we are, so that's all 3 bows added on. Now it is time to get the decoration ready to hang. So I am going to grab my festive twine. For these decorations, I find 16 centimeters is a good length, so I'm just going to trim that off now. So now I've got my twine, I'm just going to fold the length in half and make sure the ends are nice and even. Now I'm going to take the folded end and I'm going to just loop it through the fastening of the hoop, so looping it through towards the back. So pull the loop through the fastening, just keeping it in place, and then you're going to want to loop the rest of the twine through it, just like this. There we go. And that's going to hold it in place really nicely. Now just add a knot to the end of the twine. Now just make sure it's nice and secure, and then grab your scissors or your thread snippers and just give those ends a little trim. So our decoration is very nearly finished, we just need to add the last bow. So lay your hoop down on the table and grab your ribbon. Now you're going to want to just slide it underneath the hoop fastening. Just like this, and that is just going to form the position for the bow. Now loop the ends of the ribbon round and start tying your bow. So I'm just getting in place, and then I'm going to give it a little tidy up. As I said, I'm not the best at tying bows, but I'm actually quite pleased with this. So I'm just going to trim the ends off just to make sure that they're not too long. There we go, that's looking really festive. Just give it a little tidy up and make sure you're happy with the position of it. So here is our finished Christmas tree ornament. It's looking so festive. I already can't wait to hang it on the tree this year. Will you be making your own decorations this year? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching. Happy stitching.